a few weeks ago, on Super Bowl day to be exact, I took the opportunity to go around and see a friend of mine, Walter Boles. So I often go around and see Walter in his garden. He's got the most wonderful garden full of native plants and bird aviaries and chook pen and bird feeders and water baths and all sorts. And it's often the most relaxing place to sit and have a chat and enjoy a nice cup of tea. And actually Walter is the guy that introduced me to lots of different types of tea, and it was a common thing at the Australian Museum for people to come down and sit in the bird department at morning tea time and partake of any number of teas that Walter had on hand. Russian Caravan and obviously English breakfast, Irish breakfast, Earl Grey. There was all sorts. One I really remember is the Arctic Fire, which had corn flour in it and a most amazing smell. But anyway, Walter's garden on Super Bowl day. I hope you enjoy watching me and listening to Walter's stories about some of the things he did while working at the Australian Museum.
There's a spider crawling across my leg.
That's just an Andrew's cross. It's gone.
Beep. Not up my leg.
Hi, I'm sitting here with Walter Boles. Walter was used to be a curator at the Australian Museum Bird Department and scientific officer for quite a number of years. 37.
37.
And I met Walter back in 1983 when I was doing work experience at the Australian Museum, and I ended up working with him for I worked for the museum for almost 20 years, doing work for different departments, but Walter has been a good friend of mine for ever since 1983. And I often enjoy coming and having a nice cup of tea in Walter's garden. I can thank Walter for introducing me to the delights of many different types of tea, many fond memories of the museum. But today I want to chat to Walter about his involvement in bird research in Australia and how he got involved in working at the museum and his love of birds. So, Walter, good morning.
Good morning to you, Peter.
So, you were born in America. Can you tell us how you came to move to Australia and get involved?
Well, I did my undergraduate degree in zoology and secondary education. So I thought I would perhaps go and teach a while, see the world before I settled back down in the US. And so I came to Australia about a month after I graduated to be a high school teacher. That was in 1974. Fortunately, I found very quickly that I didn't really like children. So after I taught a bit, I was fortunate to use the other part of my education and got a job as a technical officer at the Australian Museum the following year.
Wow. And that was the early 70s, about 1974?
75, March 75.
Wow, okay. And you were then at the Australian Museum through to your retirement not that long ago, 4 or 5 years ago?
2012.
2012.
6 years ago.
Wow. So obviously a lot of fond memories of the museum.
Yep.
And you obviously got involved in a lot of different types of research. I know some of what you did, where we overlapped a little bit, but probably one of the more fascinating stories that I remember from the museum was when you were on a combined museum trip in Queensland and rediscovered, we'll say, you found a mummified remains of a night parrot.
Right.
Which around about the time, that was the first evidence for how long of its existence?
It was the first physical evidence of a night parrot since 1912.
Wow.
And this was in 1990.
So, and at that time, I think there was a lot of publicity around trying to rediscover the night parrot.
Yep.
I know Dick Smith was very verbal in trying to promote public awareness.
Yep. Yes, they wanted to see if it was still extant. They were looking for physical evidence, either feathers, dead specimen, live specimen, photographs, something like that that showed that the parrot was still around. And this fit certainly the bill in showing that there had been, until its death, a live night parrot in that part of southwest Queensland.
Yeah, it was within its range, but its range had obviously changed a lot. South Australia, I think, was a stronghold for it, and obviously it had changed markedly.
Western Australia, yes. Well, the known range of the night parrot historically covers most of the continent.
Yeah.
But obviously it came and went in areas, and where most of the specimens came from, the Gawler Ranges in South Australia, has undergone considerable vegetation change. So no chance of it being there anymore.
Now, you weren't actually off looking for the night parrot at that time, were you? You were on a field trip.
We had been in the field for about 6 weeks, and we were actually going home. We had been up around Broome, the Kimberley, the top end, and we were actually just headed home on a very, very hot day. And one of the people on the trip, who was an American scientist, had seen some pratincoles, which he had not seen before. So he wanted to go back and have a look. So Wayne Longmore from the Queensland Museum and I pulled our vehicle over and stopped while he went off to look. And it was a stinking hot day, so we just sat there. And it wasn't until after Max, the visiting scientist, had seen his birds, pulled back up behind us, and I went back to look in the passenger window and say, what, did he see him and whatnot? And as I looked down, there was a dead night parrot on the ground next to my foot.
Absolutely amazing. Absolutely amazing. And obviously it was mummified. We don't know how long it had been there or where it had come from. Could well have been stuck in a radiator grill for thousands of years.
It looked like it was certainly flattened, side to side, so very likely it had been in a grill, transported from somewhere, but no way to know. It was mummified. Ants had eaten out most of the soft anatomy, so it was largely skin, bones, feathers, and not much else, all sort of held together by luck more than anything else.
And obviously it had sparked a lot more interest, lots of reports of fat green budgies coming from shooters and property owners, and today we now have photographic evidence of the existence of night parrots.
They've actually rediscovered them. There are actually, birds have been captured.
Wow.
Birds have been captured in the hand, photographed, in several populations have been found now, but very hard to find, very sparse, widely separated, and the whole story is surrounded with bits of intrigue anyway.
Yeah. Now, another bird that you're involved, not in its rediscovery, but in its classification and naming, is the Eungella Honeyeater from northeastern Queensland. So you were also on a trip up there and identified what possibly is...
Well, yeah, it's interesting that Wayne Longmore, who was also on the night parrot trip in the same car as I was at the time back in mid-1970s in the Army. Now, Wayne had grown up. He had been associated as an amateur bird watcher for many, many years, and he had a 2-week break from the Army, so he volunteered to come in and sort out honey eaters in the collection. And honey eaters had always been his main liking. And as he was doing this, he came across a bird specimen that had been collected previous year up near Mackay, up in the mountains. And he recognized right away this bird was not what it was labeled to be. And it did not appear to be anything else. That was known from the field guides. But what he realized was this new bird, had been photographed back in 1961, and the picture published in the ornithological journal Emu, and misnamed. And no one had picked it up, even though the obvious clue was right there in front of them, and it had been named as a bridled honeyeater, which was known from Atherton region.
Right.
And so the field guides showed that bridled honeyeater occurred down here. So everyone just assumed it was a bridled. But a bridled has a two-tone bill, a black and orange bill. And this had a solid black bill. And it was right there in front of everyone, almost the frontispiece, and no one picked it up.
Right on the nose.
And so Wayne picked this up, right away knew something was different. So we plotted and planned and did a field trip up there and found them, got pictures of them, a few specimens, brought them back, and in due course, Wayne and I officially described and named the specimen.
Now, the naming, I'm interested in that. So it was named after a very prominent Australian ornithologist, Keith Hindwood.
That's right.
How did that come about?
Keith Hindwood had been Wayne's mentor when he was a kid. And Keith was a leading amateur ornithologist, but of world renown. So Wayne wanted to honor him with that name. Keith had unfortunately died prematurely a few years before I came to Australia. But so Wayne selected the name Honeyeater in honor of Keith.
Okay. Wow. Now, another thing I know about your background is you did a lot of work on taxonomy, bird taxonomy.
Yep.
Can you tell me a little bit about your background or how you became interested in that side of research?
Well, I've always had sort of an interest of wondering what was related to what. But in a museum, that is one of the main things they can do because they have this massive collection of specimens. So you can physically compare things. And so I started doing this in the, shall we say, the pre-DNA era. So you could actually get specimens out, compare them, and see the differences geographically, male, female, parts of the country and whatnot. So I was interested in doing that with a number of things. And obviously with something like the new honeyeater, which was called Eungella Honeyeater, by the way, it was up around the township of Eungella.
Yep.
It's an indigenous word meaning mountain of the mist, which describes the Clark Range quite well.
Okay.
But so comparing specimens to actually work out what are the differences here? Why is this different from this? And can you justify that considering a new separate species?
Mm-hmm.
And if so, what is it most closely related to? So that sort of work did work with a number of the things from the Clark Range had not been collected before. So several new subspecies were named from there.
Yep, yep.
And so that, and looking at a number of the unresolved problems in the relationships of Australian birds to things overseas and among themselves.
Now that's come a long way. I mean, DNA sequencing, there's a lot of, I mean, it's not without its argument. There's obviously a lot of controversy behind some decisions, but it's been beneficial.
Immensely so.
Yeah.
And some things have been confirmed that we thought from morphology. Some things we have found got completely wrong.
Wow.
Completely wrong. And I think always misled because you look at the modern things and say these look sort of similar or whatnot, but almost tend to forget that these things have had millions of years to evolve. And so sometimes they end up looking similar because they're doing somewhat similar things. And that coloration, pattern, shape, whatever of the bill tends to be beneficial for it. Mm-hmm. Other times you can get something where everything's closely related, but once one part of that gets isolated, and it may change very quickly, and you don't pick up that it's actually related closely to these other things. And so it's been eye-opening.
Yeah.
And so finding a lot of things, almost a number of studies every year, I should say, are finding that closely related things may not be each other's closest relatives, or at least deserve to be split at several species. So it's been exciting.
Yes, oh definitely. And I think you assisted on the Birdwatching Megaspots book that I worked on with Chris Farrell and had a big input on the classification section and the evolution of Australian birds. one thing I noticed from that book was actually the Victoria's national bird is the helmeted honeyeater.
Yep.
But now it's considered a subspecies of
Even
the yellow-tufted honeyeater.
been considered a subspecies for quite some time.
Yeah.
But it's a very distinctive subspecies. It is restricted to just a small area and strictly Victorian, not found anywhere else. So they.
And was that a result of sort of morphological studies, or it's just?
Morphological studies quickly identified this as, a distinct form.
Yeah.
But they were able to show pretty convincingly that it was still a subspecies of the yellow-tufted honeyeater rather than on its own, but certainly a distinct member of that group.
Now, you've been around Australia quite a lot. You've seen lots and lots of remote areas and lots of not-so-remote areas and gone birding. Are there any favourites? Do you have a real area that you love going to all the time?
Well, certainly in the early stages of the museum, one of the first projects we were on was a rainforest survey up and down the coast. And so I got to visit a whole variety of different types of rainforests, everywhere from just sort of north of Sydney right up to Cape York Peninsula. So I've always liked rainforests in different forms. And so it's been quite nice being able to visit those, go back to them. Just, it's quite a change from where I grew up, which was prairie.
Yeah.
And from a lot of Australia, which I've traveled through, which is, drier woodland, open areas. So yeah, rainforest.
Yeah. And I know you did a very, very successful book on robins and flycatchers of Australia. Is that your favourite group?
It's certainly one of my favourite groups. I never get tired of yellow robins. Mm-hmm. They're usually fairly confiding. A few other groups I like log runners are special. But,
very good. Now, you also have an interest in reptiles, I know. And I've known ever since I met you, you always had a bearded dragon or another reptile around, shingleback or something. Which came first? I mean, I know evolutionarily reptiles came first, but...
In my personal evolution, reptiles came first. So I started keeping lizards as pets when I probably would have been about 4 or 5. And back in the U.S., collared lizards and box turtles and a few other things. And so off and on, I would say pretty continually, since then to now, I've had a lizard or turtles or snakes or something as a pet.
Yeah, wonderful. Yeah. Thank you very much for taking some time out today, Walter. It's been great to catch up, as always.
Pleasure.
I'll be going into the museum tomorrow. I know we have a fair common history there, and I'll be going into the bird department and checking out some specimens. So I'll be thinking of you while I'm in there for sure.
Good.
But yeah, thank you very much for taking some time out today and talking to us on a wonderful subject.
My pleasure, Peter.
Thank you.